it seemed to be a natural fit. Now, it was a very different school then.
Yeah.
It was all commuter, it was all male. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, a few from Howard County, but mainly city and county. I was attracted to the fact it was Catholic, Jesuit, and small. So it's nothing very much more profound than that.
Gotcha.
Girl, I dated at Loyola. I eventually married a Loyola graduate. Yes, I did. I knew them, had met them at different dances where they were chaperones, came to Mass here occasionally. And when I was a senior in college, I went next door. We came over on a dare to serenade the Jesuits for Christmas. And then they invited us in, and they were, very cordial. This building, then, the building was the Jesuit house. And where there's now that paved area, kind of like a little cloister in there, that actually was below ground. And then the next 2 levels brought you to their first floor. So I'd had social interaction.
Oh, wow. Very, very cool.
I like the students. One of the things I most like about our students is that they're proud of each other's accomplishments. And it's very refreshing to be around students who really like the fact that this classmate of mine did this and that classmate did that. That's a really healthy atmosphere. I like my colleagues. I like my subject. I love the Jesuit presence, and it's a beautiful campus. It's not a bad thing to look out on a day to the campus, to the green, to the buildings. So I'm happy. And in the main, have been happy the whole time. A few moments of less than happiness, but the 8 years I was chairman, I didn't like it because I don't like being a chairman, frankly. You get shot in the front, you get shot in the back. But it's been, on the whole, a very satisfying experience. Depends on what the college is. I mean, there are certain Jesuit schools that are so secularized you wouldn't know they were Jesuit, except for medallions and emblems and an occasional walk by. But there are Catholic colleges that have a real Catholic presence. Yeah. I used to teach a course between history of art and art history and English called the Baroque in poetry and art, with a Jesuit, Father Joseph Sobereski, who at one point was the rector of the community here. He was the original dean of advising. He now lives over in Washington at Gonzaga and is very active in spiritual direction. There was a Father John Shea who with whom I did annotation 19 of the exercises, which is, are you familiar with what that is?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that in this class, actually.
Yeah, so he directed me. And then there are other Jesuits whom I admire greatly, Father John Conley from theology and Father Joe Rossi, Father Borges from history, Father Haig, of course. There are others, but right now they're not coming to mind. And in my past, there was a Father Thomas Higgins of philosophy who wrote a book called Man is Man, and a generation of young men read that as their ethics book. Father Halber, who was the chairman of chemistry, who used to take care of assassinating the pigeons. Before Maryland Hall was reconfigured, it had pigeon nests everywhere. And I'm city. Pigeons to me are flying rats. And one day somebody complained to the rector that this priest was shooting pigeons, so he had to stop. But he was a very successful chairman of the chemistry department, which has always been a strong department here. There were deans and of course Father my first president was Father Beatty, and then Father Sellinger, and then Father Ridley, and now Father Linane. So, it's been a cast of Jesuit presidents. It makes you confront yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in a very strenuous way. You know, the part of Annotation 19 where you're supposed to pray for humiliation and mortification. Well, I've reached the stage where I pray for the grace to pray for the grace to pray for the grace to pray for the grace. I haven't gotten quite to pray for it, but it certainly made me aware of the gift of the society. And during my years here, we've had different activities. Certainly, Father Brown has tried to organize them, and he's certainly an asset to this college. He's following a long tradition. We've had speakers in on, you know, the Jesuit mission, the Jesuit informing education, and it certainly has informed my vision. You know, the goodness of creation is something that Jesuits urge. They don't want you to be a materialist, and they don't want you to be a Manichaeist. They want you to be a Catholic. And I think that's been done here. You know, if people want to hear it.
Okay, thank you.
The differences between a public institution and an authentically Jesuit institution. We say Merry Christmas. But there's you know, the AMDG, and the world is charged with the grandeur of God. These aren't mere cliches to trap people, but they really speak to what Jesuit education is about. Ultimately, as Ignatius says, it's about salvation. It's also about respecting God's creation and not turning one's back on his creation. All for the greater honor and glory of God. I think if that informs your work, you try to avoid mediocrity. Because it's easier, you know, you can drift into a kind of pleasant mediocrity, but always is that very fiery Basque Ignatius standing there looking at you, and I think that's a major difference between us and secular institutions. I can't speak to other religious orders. You know, the Benedictines have some good schools, the Dominicans have some good schools, the Franciscans have some good schools. So I think each one has a different charism.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the closest to us would be Dominicans.
Right, right.
You know, they're as intellectual an order as you're going to find anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had retreat masters who were Jesuits, and in those days, retreats, you went home, but you were there all day, and there wasn't a big difference between what they said and then subsequently what I learned. You know, I never had confronted Ignatius directly in that regard, but yeah, sure, I think it has. It's, you know, there really is a Jesuit charism, and there also is real Jesuit devotions to the Sacred Heart, for example. There's a program called Hearts on Fire. I don't know if you've become familiar with that, but it's directed toward youth. The former director was an alumnus of this school, Phil Hurley. He's now Father Philip Hurley. And it has changed the way I pray. Yeah, it has. I don't know for the better or for the worse, but it's different.
Thank you.
Tend to measure things. You know, the examen is real. And making the examen every night, I don't do it 3 times a day as some do, I do it every night, makes you look at the difference between what you're called to do and what you've done. I keep consolingly Mother Teresa's injunction, you know, we're not here to succeed, we're here to be faithful. That helps sometimes when you're marking papers. But I think the ultimate thing is that, I don't know if this is just Jesuit, or I think I was raised this way as well, but every human being you look at is a child of God. You know, in C.S. Lewis's formulation, anybody I see will either be, after death, one of the brightest stars that ever glowed, or a hideous child of Satan. And that causes you, I think, to respect the people you meet and to see in them all sorts of possibilities. It's funny, we were doing Flannery O'Connor this morning in the 101, and I just kind of made the point that one of the things she's trying to get across is that we're all grotesque sinners. But nonetheless, we are loved by God and have the opportunity to become what He wants. And we can't let ourselves be typed. You know, I don't think people around here, at least I don't hear them, type our students or, you know, typical this, typical that. They're too varied. And that, I think, is a part of the Jesuit vision of what you might call the symphony of creation. Not everybody's a fiddle, you know. Some people are oboes. And that, I think, is part of a Jesuit atmosphere.
Thank you.
And and things mean something. You know, it really means something to be a student, to be a teacher, to follow your vocation, to make the world better because you're there. I think that's all Jesuit. You know, the Jesuits don't hate the world; they want to transform it. You know, you're part of a number, you know, a numerous but nonetheless pretty exclusive group of people. You're Jesuit college students, and that's something to be said.